We are pleased to offer this event to the Butler County business community as a partnership with the Butler County Community College and also our sponsor, First Commonwealth Bank. In addition, I would like to introduce and thank the Butler County Commissioners for joining us today, Commissioner Leslie Osche, Commissioner Kevin Boozel, and then Commissioner Kim Geyer, along with our first Chief of Economic Development and Planning for Butler County, Mr. Mark Gordon. The programs for this morning have a detailed biography and contact information for each of our guests, along with a complete list of row officers and county elected officials. I will begin by introducing our head table. To my right is Chairman of the Board of the Commissioners, Commissioner Leslie Osche, Commissioner Kevin Boozel, and Commissioner Kim Geyer. I'm so sorry. I'm like left or right. We had to switch it up a little bit this morning. To my left is Mark Gordon. So our purpose today is a twofold. First, we want to have the Butler County business community the opportunity to meet our county commissioners in person. And secondly, we're interested in hearing from them on the specific boards and committees they serve on and what we should be educating ourselves on that's relative to Butler County. Time permitting, we will entertain questions and comments from the audience after our guests have spoken. So let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I think we would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. It's always great to get out. We love to be out and have the opportunity to hear from you, what your concerns are related to our county, which is we know how extremely fortunate we are to live in Butler County. As we look across the Commonwealth and as we participate with counties across the Commonwealth, we are absolutely blessed with the people that we have here, with the successes that our organizations drive and our institutions drive. So we're extremely blessed in this county and to represent you in this way. So thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to all of you for being here this morning. I'm going to give you the morning disclaimer, and that is that yesterday we were in Washington, D.C., which is great news, talking about our $25 million grant for the Gateway 228 and meeting with legislators and Department of Transportation. And we got back last night at midnight. So ergo, why these kind folks at the country club went looking for the carafes with the coffee in them, because we're sort of pumping it in as we go. So we want to thank you for that. We roll a little bit differently because we do work as a team. And so what we did was we're going to try to give you a high-level sort of overview of county finances, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and some of the services, and then we'll take some questions on those, and then we're going to come back and do economic development and transportation, because we figure that's probably what everybody's most interested in. But our format is such that I'll kind of roll us through this, and they'll just interject when they think they want to, however we want to do that. So this is kind of usually the way we roll. So we're going to, oh gosh, and then we have to click. There's that. Whoops, let's back up. Oh, okay, Tom. There we go. Shoo. It goes real quick, that clicker. So when we came into office, there were three main objectives, I think, that we arrived at. And I got to tell you, it's really easy to kind of strategic plan when you only have 3 people on your board, right? But I also, before we get into that, have to acknowledge not only our county row offices, and I think Diane Marburger is here with us today, who do a tremendous job at all of the things that they do to keep our county safe and solvent, but also our department heads and employees, and some of them are actually maybe were here. I saw a few that used to be department heads. So we can't obviously take credit for this. This is a lot of what they do. So we just want to make sure we acknowledge them as well. But the 3 strategic objectives were: 1, excellence in governance. The second is advancing economic development and transportation. And the third is really integrating our health, safety, and quality of life and the department's such as emergency management, human services, and parks, and really try to kind of work to get them to work closer together because we all tend to work in silos. So we're just going to roll through a little bit of the governance piece, first of all, that really is about the finance for the most part. So one of our goals, obviously, was long-term approach to county finances and operational investments in order to achieve that long-term cost containment, some debt management, and improve the S&P rating. That, for us, involved sort of looking at how we budget and really using actual costs instead of having folks come in with sort of pie-in-the-sky projections of what they, or if I just need a 2% increase or a 3% increase or whatever every year. So it really was based on looking historically at what those actual costs were and trying to get the budget more in line. Also, to be able to restore a fund balance to levels that so that you have to levels that are recommended, so that we that are best practice, so that we actually have a backup. Should anything occur or go wrong, that there's actually some money tucked away, and then also to adopt a long-term capital improvement plan, the debt management and fund balance policies, and then in terms of workforce planning, we'll talk about a little bit in management. And then finally, the first thing that we did, one of the first major things that we did in coming in was the Act 13 resolution. 2018 budget for the general fund was balanced at $64,408,986. The budget growth in 2018 was 2.2%. There was an additional $1.4 million in spending. So you can see up there that the real estate taxes amount to about $48 million. And I think we have about a 98% collection rate. And Diane does a great job of helping our municipalities with that as well, as does our tax claim and our assessment offices. And all the other general fund revenues represented about almost $16 million. So, and we use the fund balance carryover. There's often, almost every year, there's an amount of that fund balance that gets pushed back into the budget for the following year. The next slide sort of just demonstrates, and for those who can actually see it, how that budget balanced. And primarily, we had some reductions in our pension contributions. The pension board went through an extensive process this year to look at how we, okay, Diane, I just went blank. We did the RFP for, thank you. Wait, actuarial, thank you very much. Our actuarial analysis, I just went totally blank. So that we could do a much better job of projecting what the requirements were going to be for our pension payments going forward. And I believe we are about 85 or 6% funded at this point. So what you really see here is that additional, the Act 13 dollars, the impact fee dollars, and our growing county is what, and the growing tax base is what really keeps us from having to, do tax increases year over year like many other counties are having to do that don't experience that same growth, but yet the need keeps rising. Okay, so this kind of gives you just a picture of where the biggest expenses are. So what you're going to see is on the right, the general government and judicial is in the red. The public safety, which involves the prison, probation, and 911 is in the green. Human services is yellow, and so forth. So the biggest pieces of the pie there are public safety, which the prison alone is a $12 million budget. So that's a pretty big number. And I have to say that our warden has done an exceptional job of managing that budget, and the prison board working with him has done an excellent job of trying to manage that budget. But it's a big number. It's about $100 a day, for an individual incarcerated. the general government, judicial, as we said, and then human services, what that represents there is what you see is what our county tax dollars provide by way of match to the state dollars. So if we were really looking at the whole big budget, you'd be looking at about 194 million as opposed to just the 64 million in the general fund. So there's a lot of money that comes in for human services as well as for domestic relations and other departments. Now here's the reason that we do so well. In 1 year alone, you can see that the assessed valuations of property rose by almost $900,000. So it really is providing that means by which to address any of the needs that come along because of that growth. This represents the change in the fund balance over time. So what you're seeing is from 2008 through 2017, the growth in the general fund balance at the end of the year. So obviously for those who are in business, you know that you're hoping that your revenues exceed your expenses over time and that you are building fund balance. I have to give credit to the prior board, obviously, who I think took a tremendous hit in raising the tax before they went out of office, because it would be probably to take all credit for a rising fund balance would be a misnomer at this point. But at the same time, if you don't work hard to maintain the budget and work hard to maintain those cost structure, we would be back up against a ceiling pretty quickly. So I think the combined efforts over the years of our staff and departments of trying to keep that expense to a minimum was in part responsible for this incredible increase in that fund balance, and also the work of the pension board. The Act 13 resolution, which we think was really critical for us, is that we dedicated, so we looked at that Act 13 impact fee dollars coming in, which has been somewhere about $1.5 million, I think, per year. Say that again? 1.9. So we had 1.9 million. So we actually passed a resolution that dedicated the money. We knew we were going to have to put the new 911 radio system into play. So that was a $13 million project, and in order to make sure that the debt service would be covered on that, we dedicated a piece of that Act 13 to addressing that debt service. And then we dedicated the other piece to developing what is this county's, which is this Commonwealth's only second county infrastructure bank in the Commonwealth. And that infrastructure bank allows for municipalities to actually do financing to fund projects at little or no interest rate. So we dedicated that piece to that so that we can make sure that that money was getting back out in the communities. And then finally, the third piece of that is going to IT and capital improvements. And if there's anything left over, which is not typical, then that we can use that for other miscellaneous, mostly capital. But as you well know, we came in and had to do a lot of IT, a lot of automation and IT upgrades when we walked in the door. Kevin, we described walking into the assessment office and looking at the pencils and the cards and the erasers, and decided that maybe that was not the best way to do assessment. So it was, yeah, and the cabinets and cabinets and cabinets and cabinets of things that had not been, technology had not been really a focus for our county for a while. Interestingly enough, if you want to just take a look, the NACO does some, NACO has an opportunity for us to go into the system and plug in a lot of different indicators and see where we stand. And we did just some comparisons just to give some folks an idea of where Butler County is against Pennsylvania counties or the other 3,000 some counties in the United States, as well as Washington County, which is a similar fourth-class county in our region. So just in looking at what property tax is in terms of general revenue, the percent of that, the county expenses from 7 to 13, they have obviously not gone past that, so they had not updated their system yet with the new data, because we're long past 13, so I'm not really sure what big holdup is. I think we should hold their dues until they get caught up. But probably the most interesting thing here that jumped out at me on this chart, again, was that the rise in the cost, and those percentages obviously represent the increases in expenses, but if you look at obviously the public safety, the justice and public safety increase, that's the number that probably jumped out at me the most anyway, and all of us the most. Now here again, this is, and Mark will talk about this a little bit later, but if you look at the housing starts in this county, we are #1 in the Commonwealth for housing starts. And you look at how many new homes have been and housing units have been added in our county compared to Washington and Beaver. And it's just astronomically greater. And then quickly, some of the things we worked on in our workforce, our own workforce planning and management, is that we early on adopted a compensation plan and policy for our non-union employees that really established a framework to evaluate the value of positions and gave us a framework in which to hire personnel. It controlled long-term costs by establishing both a base and a ceiling within pay grades, so that limited compensation beyond relative value. And in the absence of a merit system, encouraged movement and advancement among personnel to drive that sort of desire and innovation to learn and to grow. We also hired a new firm to negotiate our contracts, which has been extremely successful for us this year. We figure our savings already in only 2 of our 8 bargaining sessions has been at least $500,000 over a 4-year period. The calculations are such. So a lot of that. Then in streamlining, the Conservation District and Community Action have now become independent of county government, which was better overall for our community and I think for our county. So that helped us eliminate at least 6 full-time positions. But more than that, it's going to provide a better service back to the community. We were upgrading and deploying technology, and there's just a quick piece about that. The other thing, I think, was the encouragement of citizens to get involved, and we took multiple tours throughout the county, one on the county's radio system, one on municipal planning. We took the entire planning department along with some of our other departments that Mark is now responsible for on a tour of municipalities and gave them the opportunity to figure out how the county could help them and to answer a lot of questions and to hear what their concerns were. So that was a big piece for what we did. We also had a couple of farm town halls, which yielded the hiring of an agronomist through Penn State Extension to serve the farm community better. Special focus has been on governance and board development and appointments, and thanks to our Leadership Butler County program and Stan's program, it gives us an opportunity to really reach out and appoint a lot of people who have been through those programs to board, so we have a resource. We also have a way that you can go actually through our website, and if you have an interest in those boards, to be able to share that interest. And we did partner with the Chamber for some Sandler training for our county employees as well, which I think they truly appreciated. We're going to jump real quick. Oh, no, I don't want to leave this for a second. Election equipment. So you're all aware that the governor has mandated us to move to a paper system by 2020. So probably our biggest budgetary challenge for this year is that if we're going to make that move, our intention is to do that before the end of this year, is to make that purchase. So we have spent copious hours reviewing equipment and systems and software and hardware and all of those things. And it looks like it'll be about $1.5 million project. And we could wait, we could play chicken if we wanted to. But in reality, I think we all believe that moving to that paper ballot system is going to serve our constituents better. And there are some issues that we've been keeping abreast with CCAP related to that with our County Commissioners Association, who is sort of advocating on behalf of counties because they know this is a tremendous expenditure. without the resources to follow, which, surprise, surprise, unfunded mandates are always a challenge. One of the big issues right now is, I think, Kevin, do you want to share yesterday, just real quick, what happened? Somebody? Is it on? Hello. Oh, Pat's got it. You're on now.
Oh, there we So there's a couple challenges. Number one, they don't have the system certified yet. We're supposed to look at purchasing, so that's making it very difficult. There's one actual certified one that we would consider, but the other ones are in process. So on a timeline, we're looking at when do we as commissioners turn over the Board of Elections to the next board, who will also make that decision if we don't make it ahead of time. So we're on a timeline crunch. The other part of that is Mr. Torres is looking into a legal opinion on when that actual change up would happen, and we've agreed from CCAP, and Doug has agreed that we would follow whatever guidance he gave us from a legal opinion point of view, which says, does it happen in January 1? Is that whenever the process turns over? Is it whenever you get signatures? Is it when you end up on the ballot? Is it when does that happen? Because that makes a big difference between January and March and February. So I think that that's one of the things that are holding us up. And the other thing is, it's $125 to $130 million state cost across the state for the election equipment. The feds have generously put in $13 million, so you can see we're a little short. So the other question is, where does that other money come from? And there is pressure for us to make a decision before going in to the next election cycle. They don't want to do it during a presidential election with new equipment, right? You can imagine the chaos that could cause across the state. You don't want to be I don't know, a Florida and some Chad thing. So all of those issues are being addressed as they move forward. But there's some really good equipment out there, and I think that I think the community is going to find a lot of value in the new system. But it's really tough for us to look at almost a $2 million bill for a system that you use twice a year and then store it in a closet the rest of the time. It's a difficult sell, but it's a necessary one, and it's one of our critical operations.
Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Okay. So also quickly, we'll just talk a little bit about the third objective, which is the integration of our health, safety, and quality of life. Under public safety priorities, obviously, we've spent an awful lot of time on this new public safety radio system, which we expect to go online at the beginning of the year, and working with the municipalities and being able to provide the appropriate funding to cover the cost of their radio systems. Also, addressing issues that I know that many are facing, the issues of the decreasing volunteer base in the fire and EMS, and that's one that I know is close to everybody's hearts. So to the degree that we can do anything at our level to advance that, that's obviously something that we're concerned about, and then obviously disaster preparedness. And we're, again, I think more fortunate in this county than ever. Most of our departments, not only in public safety and human services, when audits are done and when certifications come through and when inspections come through, our county really comes to the top. Our folks have high marks, whether it's the state or the feds, in every department that we have. And so you really should be confident and proud when those audits come back. I mean, it really does. It's really amazing to see, how well they perform. The prison, obviously, is one of the things that we are working together on through the Criminal Justice Advisory Board. Is what's something called the Stepping Up Initiative that works to try to move some of the folks who are seriously mentally ill out of prison and into appropriate treatment. That represents about 30, could be up to 30% of our prison population. So you can see the significance of cost, in having folks not really getting appropriate treatment and being incarcerated for that reason. So those are some of the really priorities that we're working on in that area. I think in parks, continuing to expand the service to municipalities, because that has been extremely valuable, I think, to our municipalities, is the fact that we have a grant program for them, and our Parks Department has always assisted municipalities in applying for state and federal grants. There have been some significant Alameda Park upgrades, and we would be looking into the future at Diamond Park in collaboration with the city, I think, to maybe upgrade and beautify Diamond Park in some capacity and have it really reflect more of what the new our new building facade now looks like, and tying that into whatever streetscape the city is going to pursue. So somewhere down the road, we'll be looking for grant money ourselves to upgrade Diamond Park. And they just went online with a new software program as part of the IT upgrades in parks so that it makes it more user-friendly for folks to be able to reserve shelters or buy pool passes, and they can do all of that online, so that we just approved new software for the Parks Department. And finally, under Opioid and Human Services, you all well know that we have spent a lot of time trying to educate the public on the opioid crisis, and working with the media, especially the Butler Eagle's been extremely supportive, and the radio station both, in helping us try to get that message out. It has taken us down a path really that leads to how do we address employment, because what we truly believe, and we know that every employer is struggling for employees, and people's quality of life matters in terms of whether they're employed. I mean, you can measure your quality of life often by how well employed you are. And so the focus really has become on employment as a prevention and as a cure, and how to really address that issue. So we are looking at a couple of models in partnership with the college and tourism and the chamber, and all of the organizations that relate to that would involve some empowerment training for everyone involved. And so this is really where we're trying to address the issue by not saying that we're just, that we're all separate silos, but really that we all have our challenges and issues. We believe that everybody can recover from something, because we all have our issues. I think I'm addicted to chocolate. I'm not really sure, but but I think that's the case. And so really the focus has been on that employment efforts and driving all resources from all areas into that effort over the next couple of years. And finally, I think that has created some challenges for our departments, because this is your, in addition to the change in the laws, the reporting laws, this is looking at your children and youth intakes from 2014 to 2018. And you can see that they have increased by somewhere between 60 and 70%. A lot of that is related to the opioid crisis. And finally, in aging, same thing. It has certainly affected our aging department. Aging funding has been flat for a long time. But they are dealing with challenges and changes in managed care, and a significant rise in protective services for our aging population. And the problem with that is, besides it's just scary, is that when you have flat funding, it takes away from the funding that's available to provide in-home services for folks in order to try to keep them in their homes longer. So our waiting list then grows for in-home services for seniors who cannot afford that themselves. So you have a real delicate challenge within our aging department of how we're balancing that. So before we move to the economic development, are there questions you'd like to ask us about either the finances or the human services?
When it comes to purchasing voting systems and machines, is there any concern with who owns the companies that produces these things? Is there, I personally would like to see those companies that produce these to be American companies, American-owned. It's very difficult to find American-owned manufactured products anymore, but when it comes to voting machines, that would be important.
That's something we can look into in regards to the various systems that are out there. I believe there's 5 to 6 only throughout the nation. And we have interviewed and done demonstrations with each 6 of them, and have gone through the process of how they operate and what services and they provide to our voters. But as far as them being American-made, I believe they all are, but that's something that we can validate.
Obviously,
But
they
actually
are
go-
American-based companies, but
Yeah,
I think
they're-
what you get into is whether or not the components of,
Right.
printers and those
Yes.
sorts of things are
Exactly right.
probably not.
A lot of the pieces to these systems are consumables in the sense that you can buy them off the shelf, such as a printer, to go with the other pieces. It's more cost effective, it's more accessible in the event that something breaks rather than, so they have software systems that are conducive with different pieces that already exist and with various computer and technology companies, so.
We're also working with other counties on large purchase programs because if one county goes down, you have issues, you can share equipment if necessary. So, and also obviously the large volume of purchase. We're looking at both of those factors as well, but definitely a good point, and I think it's worth mentioning. Thank you.
I mean, I guess the good news there is if you move to paper, besides the fact that you have a lot of paper, you really do have that safety mechanism and backup, and I think the systems that we currently had were not connected to the internet to begin with. So I think the state really has to address the issue of the voter registration system because we're tied into the state system. So that's something that we're going to have to work with the Commonwealth on in terms of what does that look like in protection, in cyber protection, et cetera, et cetera. But really the integrity of the counties at the county level, at the polls, there is no there is no connection. So moving to paper just makes it even more solid. Anything else? Sorry.
As a first responder with the Adams Area Fire District, you mentioned that one of the biggest increases was in public safety. Is that because of the radio system that's going into place?
No, so the radio system comes out of Capitol. But I think what you saw over time in that increase in public safety also takes in the prison and probation. So it's really not it's not as much, you're going to see year over year percentage increases in operations of the 911 center or the emergency communications center, but you're not going to see that capital is addressed in another area, not in the general operating fund. Yeah, so the increase primarily would have been operating expenses, and I'm gonna say the biggest piece of that is in the prison. That's the thing about it. You really have to look at the detail when you look at the CAFR, which the controller does a fabulous job of working with us to put out. And so in that CAFR, when you look at that public safety piece, you really do have to read the detail, which is why I wanted to put it up here, because your instantaneous thought is public safety is exactly that. You don't think of it as being, prison. I don't, at least. I wouldn't have thought of that as a general public. Probably one of the best decisions that we think collectively that we made, and that has proven itself yesterday, was in bringing on our Chief of Economic Development and Planning, Mark Gordon, who was a former general manager of AK Steel, to bring us in not only a strategic point of view of how we approach this, but had to be somebody that could successfully bring together all of the entities in order to deliver on what has been for many, many years discussion about a unified working group or a unified plan so that we can speak with one voice when we go to Harrisburg or to Washington to try to bring back dollars, or when we're trying to advance whatever initiative might be in the county. And so it took a person. It was going to take a person that had the ability to do that. And we have to say that if we're remembered for anything, it'll probably be for Mark.
Thank you. Well, good morning. And Stan, thank you very much for the event today, but more importantly, thank you for what you and all of the members here and those that couldn't be here do every single day in the community of Butler County. You know, 35 and a half years I was with AK Steel and moved around a lot, 9 times, actually, a couple international. But one of the things I learned very, very early on was that you have to understand that you accomplish very, very little on your own. Everything that you do, and in my world from AK Steel, everything that I was responsible for was through the auspices of others. I never melted a heat of steel. I never shipped a heat of steel. I never rolled a heat of steel. But ultimately, I was accountable for all those things. So bringing people together to collectively work on a goal and deliver those results, it takes a team effort. So as we talk today or this morning, I may be asking some of my team members that are in this room, because Leslie and the commissioners talk about a unified plan. Well, the unified plan actually had a couple of points of origin, 2 studies dating back in the early 2000s, and essentially what it called for was you had all these individual entities that were county affiliated or county funded, but they tended to go in their own direction. Not that they were doing bad things, they were doing great things. But did you ever hear the saying, 1 + 1 = something greater than 2? Well, that's the reality of it. So my early conversation prior to saying yes with the commissioners, we talked a little bit about, well, what do you want? What do you want me to accomplish? What's the mission? And they talked a little bit about strategies around a collaborative environment on this unified plan, strategies centered around internal efficiencies in the county, strategies regarding transportation and planning, and strategies around economic development and economic growth. So the highlights of some of this is what we're going to cover. Okay, so there's a graph here that has several key pieces of information, and one of which is the changes in unemployment or job growth. And this is dated information. It's last published for the full year of 2016. We'll talk a little bit about where we are presently, but you'll see on the far left is the change in employment rates, and we are in the blue, and the country is in the gold or the orange color. And we are doing better in job growth than the nation. In fact, in 2018, our most recent statistic, our unemployment rate is 3.7%. I'll go off script here for a moment. If you look at the southwestern Pennsylvania area, we are leading in low unemployment rate in not only the southwestern Pennsylvania, but we're the lowest in the Commonwealth. So that's a blessing, but it's also a challenge for all you business owners, because where do you find people on your job openings? The graph to the right also illustrates the growth rate. That was at 1.6%, and that continues. The third graph over is a metric associated with economic growth or economic development in the region, and we continue to lead and outpace or outperform all other areas in the country in general. And the last graph there is the median income. With regards to home starts and the like, we continue to do very, very well. You'll see the number of housing units in 2010, and you'll see where we ended in 2017. Some pretty large percentage changes in that area. That trend continues. The building permits for 2018 year-to-date are annualized at around 3,200 units. So that's a significant growth. So let's talk a little bit about investment, economic development, that core strategy. So there's really two parts to it. One is you have to protect what you have. So part of our objective, part of our efforts have been helping struggling businesses or businesses that may need some additional assistance to help them remain financially strong. The other is to attract new businesses. You know, the Community Development Corporation, the CDC, and Joe Saylor, the executive director, is here. But they have two large land areas that they have been actively trying to market. And the first here is the Victory Road. And Joe, it's pretty much built out.
Yeah, we are under agreement for the final parcels. Would be 100%.
100%. Mm-hmm. The second that we're focused on is the Pullman Park. And, you know, one of the recent developments there is the new addition with the health unit that's going in there. And we are one property, or two parcels, I guess, correct?
Yeah.
Two parcels remaining. So let's talk a little bit about transportation. And why talk about transportation as it relates to economic development? Because that's what businesses are looking for. Good access for their employees, good access for their customers, and good access actually around the country. So one interesting statistic. Commissioner Osche talked about the fact that we were in D.C. yesterday, and we were talking about the 228 project. As we were building our case, a compelling argument for why we need to have that investment, we analyzed the businesses currently along the 228 corridor. And I actually hope I shock you, because it was quite a shock to all of us. As we built that narrative, we analyzed the businesses and the impact in GDP along that corridor, 3 miles either way, 3 miles east, 3 miles west, kind of coming a path down that corridor. In 2017, that generated $27 billion of goods that were shipped within our county, from county to counties, throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and actually throughout the world. $27 billion just in that corridor. That's significant. There's a lot of that material that goes to the port, a lot of that material that goes around the world. One of the reasons we felt we made a compelling argument in Washington was the fact that we're only asking for $25 million to complete that project on a return with $27 billion. So building on that build project, you know, that is 26 miles in length, that corridor, connecting Beaver County all the way to Armstrong County. And that would allow us to take advantage of some things like the cracker plant that's going on down in Beaver County. That would allow us to have access to 2 ports of call, one at the Monaca Port of Call in the Ohio River, one up off the Allegheny, up at Freeport. So vital shipping, vital transportation link. We're not just focused on 228. We're trying to focus on bringing more of the dollars out of Harrisburg locally to here. We have a lot of needs. So we've looked at transportation corridors on 228 and Route 68 as an example. In doing so, we have made an approach to try to use every dollar to leverage every other federal or state dollar that we can get. And we'll see a graph here shortly about what the transportation investments have looked like within the area. Staying on that path of transportation, we've tried to use an approach a business approach. When we put a project together, let's look at the return and let's prioritize that. And as we prioritize that, then let's make a common list of projects that we can advocate for and in the right order. Now, that doesn't come without some pain, because you're talking sometimes to municipalities that have competing projects, and that doesn't mean that they don't have a worthwhile project. That means that not today, but maybe tomorrow, that project gets prioritized. She mentioned the infrastructure bank. That's an opportunity to help those municipalities to allow them to advance projects on their own that they otherwise might not be able to do. We're getting ready to fund our first offering of projects, and we have a wide range of projects. We have some road projects, one actually associated with Route 228 down at the MSA Thruway. We also have some projects here in the city of Butler along Main Street. We have some flood control projects, and we have some desperately needed sewer projects in the areas. The graph here shows the transportation funding through a cycle, and you'll see it is in millions of dollars on the left. You'll see where we currently stand in terms of getting those dollars through 2017. The next graph, or the next slide, really is is really a little discussion. In the last 8 years, the top line, $346 million of federal, state, and local dollars spent on highways. If you look specifically at the last couple years, we've taken advantage of and were awarded multiple state projects with respect to multimodal, both at PennDOT and DCED. We've gotten some ARLE grants and the Green Light Go project, say that 3 times. But all have substantial dollars associated with those. The other role of transportation, connecting people to jobs. So last Christmas, the bus service out of Newcastle taking people to the city of Pittsburgh stopped. The Butler Transit Authority turned around, used that opportunity, helped those residents, get them to the city of Pittsburgh. We now have bus service to the city of Pittsburgh, routes along Route 8, and we have also a process down Route 68. The other portion of that, or the next step, is to take the 528 Park and Ride and use a first mile or last mile to connect from that stop, connect people to their places of employment. We're working with a company owned by Ford, Translock, and they're using that data and that service to look at how we get people from that Park and Ride to some of the newer investments here in the area. For example, towards the steam fitters over in Jackson Township, to the new FedEx facility in Jackson Township, to the new UPS facility in Jackson Township, to businesses in Cranberry and locally. So a nice way of getting people to their final destination. Okay. I guess the last comment I would give is that we talked about some newer companies coming to the area. You know, working with Dan Santora and the folks in Cranberry, you know, we were able to save a major company in the area with Westinghouse. So, you know, if you look at the last year and a half, I think we have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot of work still remaining.
We're just going to wrap it up there.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners and Mark, for all the very informative information. And we can open it up just for a few moments if anyone has any questions or comments. No? Okay. The Butler County Chamber of Commerce is proud of the relationship that we have with our county commissioners and our involvement in the unified plan that Mark Gordon is spearheading. We trust that they feel comfortable calling upon us when needed. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you to all of our partners and our sponsor of this informative event. On behalf of myself and Stan, thank you very much and have a great day.